Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mama Project podcast. Today, I have a special guest. Her name is Erin Harris, and I will be totally honest. I stumbled upon Erin's Instagram account because, as if you follow my journey, you know my daughter pretty much just weaned herself off of nursing around 19, 20 months. But around the time that I was kind of feeling done, touched out, I kind of want this to be over. I don't really know how to end this. And I was just telling Erin before we popped on the recording that there's so much help and resources for starting a nursing journey, right? Like the latch and supply and all of that stuff. But I'm like, there's nobody talking about how to end this. How is this supposed to end? Like, what's going to happen to my boobs and all of that. And so I found Erin and I found her content. Honestly, her content is very entertaining. So you gotta
Oh,
find
thank you.
yeah, her reels are great. So Erin, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your bio before children and kind of what led you into doing, the work that you do today.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, yeah, it's like there's life pre-children and then there's life pre-COVID and post-COVID really is kind of the basis of my story. So, um, until COVID, I was actually a college instructor. I taught public speaking. I did communication courses, but one of my degrees is in health communication. So health has always been a focus of mine, and messaging and how to communicate effectively to people around various health topics. And so I had my first child in 2016, and still kind of because she was a June baby, and I either had the choice of going back at 9 weeks postpartum or 7 months postpartum. And so I went back 9 weeks, quickly realized that was a mistake. So second kid, I made a different choice with that. But it was with one kid, it seemed like, okay, I'm juggling all these balls, and nursing was a big one of those balls, right? I had no idea going into it how much time it would take. I felt kind of duped, honestly. Like I'm a studious person. I took the lactation course at the hospital. I did one at a doula center. Like, oh, I knew everything. I'm good. And boy, was I still really thrown. And um, so we had a really rough start. And I think I say this because I think for not every extended nurser, but for a lot of us, it's almost like a trauma response a little bit. Like when you struggle in the beginning and you work so dang hard to make it work, and then all of a sudden you're where people are starting to tell you you're not supposed to do it anymore, it can be really hard to let that go. You're like, but I worked so hard for this and now it's easy, and why would I do that, you know? And so that's kind of what happened with us. We got to 6 months, then we got to a year, and I remember crying. I was in like a mom group of some sort and say, because I, at the time, because again, 2017, it had not bumped up to recommending 2 years of nursing. It was still one. And I was just like, I don't feel like we're ready. And someone just said, well, then don't stop. And it almost like hadn't occurred to me that that was an option. So I stopped pumping and had assumptions. I was like, okay, my milk will dry up or she will just lose interest and we'll be done. But that isn't what turned out to be the case. We nursed another year, just kind of on demand when we were together. My body had regulated, and that was like the amazing nursing year. It was just a great tool. It was a parenting tool, if they're hurt, if they're hungry, if they're whatever, it's there. Um, and so when I was ready to have another, I got pregnant. I guess that was September 2018. And my milk started drying up in the second trimester, so around January. So it was kind of an abrupt wean initially, and I was not planning on it. Like I had been reading books on tandem nursing. Like I had fully planned to keep going because this kid was not just attached to the boob, but she was like mommy girl. And because she had nursed so long, um, I was really worried that she would get like pissed at her sibling for getting the milk. And so I kept telling her, and I think it was for myself too, because I was not ready to wean, that the milk will come back with the baby will bring milk, and then you can have milk again. And so we had about 6 months or so where we weren't nursing. Baby came and she relatched. And that was overwhelming too, because she saw the baby getting all the milk all the time, and so really started wanting it all the time as well. And that's when I started realizing the importance of boundary setting, which is a big part of what I talk about in toddler nursing, is boundaries of like when she could get it and how, and hitting me isn't okay, and all of those things that aren't relevant to infants, you know? And so that was June 2019. And my younger threw me for a massive loop because she self-weaned at 4 months. She just rejected. And when I would hear stories like that, I would almost like roll my eyes, because my experience prior to that was so different that I'm like, okay, just say you don't want to do it anymore. It's fine. Like, I had full intention of tandem nursing these kids for a long time. And we still have eating issues. Like, she's a very picky kid. And she just was like, I'm done. And I reject people who say like, well, you shouldn't have introduced the bottle or this and that, because the society we live in, that's just not realistic, right? Like, we have to be away from our babies sometimes. And um, so that happened. And so ultimately my older continued nursing and longer than my infant, but she really helped keep my supply up, because I was nursing her 3 times a day, pumping 4 times a day. So it was still, like 7 times a day for me that I was nursing, and then bottle feeding on top of that. So it was a lot. And that was happening during COVID. So during COVID, I had a 9-month-old and a 3-year-old, and was still teaching, or had just been back to teaching. And it was too much. I taught for 8 weeks virtually, and then just told my husband I can't do it anymore, because unfortunately, like, he was very, very helpful with so many parts as much as he could, but that he couldn't pump for me. He couldn't nurse for me. And at the time, weaning didn't seem to be the best option either, because I relied on it so much for my parenting and to soothe and all of that. And plus, it was just, weaning kind of is difficult. Like, it was physically difficult on me to do, and it wasn't enjoyable. It wasn't an enjoyable process. So um we went, I think it was about another 6 months or so. Once I stopped pumping for my younger one, my supply really dried up pretty quickly. And we would have conversations to my now 4-year-old, near 4.5-year-old, about the milk going away. And first it was my right boob that dried up, and we were down to like 2 nursing sessions, 3 minutes each, and asking questions about like, do you want to just go till it's gone one day and we don't know when it's going to end? Or do you want to choose a day? And she ultimately chose a day. That was going to be her last session. And that was it. Like, and yeah, it was sweet, but also heartbreaking. And the hardest part for me was I really felt isolated and alone. I didn't know anyone else who had nursed that long. And I didn't know what to do with myself, because I had all of this information and knowledge and experience. And I wasn't working, and I never ever imagined being a stay-at-home mom. And so that was a struggle. And so decided to go back to school to get a certification in lactation. So that felt right. It aligned. It's still education. It's still really, it's very similar. It's still teaching adults in college. It's just a different topic. And even so, I made it through that. And when I started, like on Instagram, for example, I was still pretty broad, talking lactation generally. And my first course was actually a prenatal course, because, like you said, that's kind of what we were taught. We were taught about that. And it's a problem, because the information you're receiving is prenatal. It is, early postpartum, which is needed, but it's missing on this huge other group on the other side of it. Um, and I just found myself really resonating with the stories of my clients who were extended nursers. And um, it started to click. It started to make sense to me that I think that was a niche that needed to be filled, that I was extremely passionate about and resonated with, and have just been on that path ever since. And it's been so fulfilling because it's almost healing for me as well, because I was felt so alone in those moments of not knowing what to do, that, helping moms now makes me feel so good about that.
Honestly, I think we could talk about this too. And like I said, there's really not a lot of people talking about it because I feel like I don't know how if this is how you felt, but I felt like nursing beyond a year for me, I was met with so much why. Like people are just like,
Mm.
why? Like baby doesn't really like need it. Like and so it just felt right to me. Like she still wanted it and I was still willing. So I was like, why would I stop? And then, of course, like you said, the AAP switched its guidelines to 2 years. But why is there so much shame in our culture, I guess, in our country? Like, where does that come from? And like, why are moms met with such resistance when it comes to extended nursing beyond a year?
I think there like just three things popped into my mind right now, and I'm sure there's more, but the things that immediately come to mind is one, um, just a sexualization of it. I think when there's an older child, especially if it's a boy, there clearly any of us who have done this, extended nursing, it's clearly not a component, but I think unfortunately people see that breasts are sexualized in our culture. And so it looks and feels wrong, even though it is the absolute reason we have breasts is to provide milk to babies, because it's seen as another thing. It just feels odd in our culture. We're used to seeing breasts on a screen during a sex scene, but not nursing a baby out in public. So that's one. The second is generationally. You know, breastfeeding was not encouraged for a long time. Formula was pushed. I think there is a really interesting parallel between the rise of like 70s wave feminism and the reduction of breastfeeding, because moms went to work and there was this formula thing over here. That's great. So they in their minds, they were doing it all, right? But they weren't really doing it all because they weren't nursing too, like our generation. And so I think I've heard a lot of women talk about when they go back to work, or their own family who didn't nurse at all or as long, they, there's almost, I think, they feel threatened a little bit or judged. It's like the longer we nurse, feel like it's a judgment of them not nursing. And, so if you have this pressure of your mom or your grandma saying like, well, I didn't nurse you and you turned out fine, it's easy to then just not want to talk about it or feel like you're doing something wrong because you value their opinion, right? Um, and now I forgot the third, but those are the two big ones, um, of just, yeah, it can be just pressure. Social pressure is such an important component, and it comes from so many different places.
That's so funny that you're saying that because my mom is a baby boomer, and so my
Mhm.
mom and like all of my aunts of that generation, none of them breastfed. None
Yes.
of them. They were actually, my mom was telling me that so I'm one of five. So with my oldest brother and my second oldest brother and myself, they were given like a pill or a shot to like dry their milk up.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time my younger brother was born, it was recalled or something and they could no longer give it. I'm like, well, that's kind of scary, to think about. So for the first time with my younger brother, my mom felt that like her milk coming in, right? But what are some reasons why moms might choose to continue a nursing relationship beyond 1 year?
Oh, the extended nursing relationship is so special. I really have yet to find an experience that is so bonding and unique. And it's one thing to nurse a baby. And actually, this is another reason why I started gravitating toward the toddler nursing is because I honestly kind of don't like babies. I tolerated having babies so I could get big kids, and big kids are so much more fun to me. Um, you have to, like, guess and try to figure out what baby's needs are, and the pressure of being everything nutritionally, emotionally to an infant is a lot. But when you get to a toddler stage, um, you that decreases, they're on food. Um, so it becomes more of a reconnection. So if you're gone for work or whatever else, even just to the store and you come home, it's an easy way to have this instant connection with your child. And there are physiological benefits to mom, like there's an oxytocin hit every time you nurse. You feel good, right? There's like a release. And so it's hard to give that up. It's hard, especially a lot of moms try cold turkey quit, and that wreaks havoc on our body. Um, and there are other benefits, like if your kid really doesn't sleep well, like that's usually one of the biggest things is a lot of my extended nursing moms, I would say at least 90% either currently or at some point did co-sleep. And so, getting your sleep, getting their sleep, there it can really be beneficial to that. And there's this, it's not true that magically at 1 year, kids don't need milk. There's so many nutritional benefits. There's so many emotional needs that children still get from the milk, especially if they're slow to transition to food. Um, it's not like it loses its value magically overnight.
One of the I don't know, one of the myths, and we can touch on myths about around extended nursing, but I I had friends questioning like, well, are you still producing? Like you
Mm,
can't still be producing milk after a year. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure something's coming out. So like she's getting something. And like I hated pumping, like
mhm.
full transparency, hated pumping. And so after a year, I was just like, I'm just gonna we'll go however many times a day. And like you, I kind of work part-time, so I was accessible to her like very
Yeah.
often, and that made it easy. But I feel like some moms, they just think, okay, well, how is my supply gonna stay up if I'm only nursing them like twice a day? So can you talk about like, I don't know, just how smart our bodies are and like how our milk just like regulates like to however often they're doing it, whether it's once or twice a day or once or twice a week.
Yeah, that's a great question because it was one that I didn't understand either. And especially if you can't really compare that first year to a 3-year-old. They're just completely different. When you're in that first year and it's so important to stay consistent with your routine and your nursing sessions to keep up your milk supply. But it's less about the amount like that they're getting, and the milk itself is different with a toddler, for example. It's the I don't remember right off the top of my head, so forgive me, but like the actual levels of vitamins and minerals, they're going to be different. And here's the wild fact. Our bodies, based on the latch, can tell which child is nursing and change the milk to be unique for that child. I wish people could see your face right now.
That's crazy. I know.
Yeah.
That's just why it's just wild too. I think the whole thing on how there's more melatonin at nighttime for them to sleep
Yeah.
too is crazy. Like that's just
Exactly, like, it's not gonna
wild.
be wildly different. It's not like if you give them a bottle of pumped milk from the night, they're gonna, like, pass out, right? That would be magical, but there are shifts, and so, like, when I was tandem nursing, my body would produce different milk for the baby than for the toddler. Um, but the how does it do it is that your body regulates. And so really milk production starts in the brain. And that's why I mentioned the oxytocin. There's a release of hormones that once they start latching, come down to release the milk. But then there's also other hormones involved that produce the milk and then release the milk. Okay. So that's kind of physiologically. So once that is established, it really, especially after a year, your body can just keep producing. I produced milk, like I could kind of squeeze my breast in the shower, for example. I would just be like, is it still there, for a year after she stopped nursing. And so there's a huge variance there. Um, and it's going to be individualized. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel like I was engorged or anything, but it was just slightly there. And so it's once it's established to that level, it doesn't go away overnight. And I know that there's this fear. There's so much fear around and anxiety around the milk just going away, because if you are in the first weeks of nursing and all of a sudden maybe you cut the night nursing out, that's really going to impact your supply, especially if you're trying to fully give all your milk. That isn't going to work. But if you're nursing a kid 3 times a day, 2 times a day, your body goes, oh, okay, that's how much milk I need to make. And if it needs more, it's all on demand, meaning like, oh, this is another good benefit and why I was so happy I kept going. Illness. So when your kid gets to be a toddler, they usually, not always, but often go to preschool or daycare. And for me, my kid stayed home the first year. And then as soon as she went to school, she was sick all the time. And I have to say, I was a little pissed, because one of the kind of things that they tell you when, to try to get you to nurse is how healthy your baby's going to be. All of these immunities, they get sick less often. And she got everything in her first year. Like, she had eye infections, and she had, I don't even know, the flu twice. And so I was just like, where are all these magical benefits of this, magic milk of mine? And maybe it would have been worse, I don't know, but that's a huge benefit to keep going. So, for example, when she got the flu, um, she couldn't keep anything down, even water, except for my milk. And so for about a week, we ramped up again, and she was about 18 months at this time. And I was like nursing around the clock again, and my body just responded and increased supply to match her. And it really was amazing. But it was that time specifically that I was so happy I didn't quit just because I thought I needed to at a year. It was still so beneficial.
So I just have a quick question. So after a year, like, so say a mom wants to go, out of town, like a girls'
Mhm.
weekend or like, date night or whatever, does she still have to pump, or is it so like after that year, or is it still so regulated that like when she returns home, she can just like kind of pick up where she left off? Because I'm curious about that phenomenon.
Um, it's always a hard question to answer because it's so dependent on the age of the kid and how often you're nursing. So if you're
Let's say like
nursing,
between 15 and 18 months, and let's say they're
Mhm.
only nursing like 3 times a day, 3 or 4 times a day.
So I would still like it if your goal is to come back and continue nursing. I would probably at least self hand express, because it's less about keeping the bottles of milk and taking them back with you, like pump and dump. It's fine, but you're also going to get in gorged, and you don't want to risk mastitis or any of the other things that happened in the beginning. They can start to come back at the end, all of the health risks for our bodies. And so, you know, if it's a 3-day trip and you're nursing 3 times a day and your toddler can handle you being gone, um, I wouldn't worry about saving all that milk, but self-express to make sure you are comfortable and that your body's still slightly stimulated, but it doesn't have to be a full pump session. Um, that being said, you may want to bring at least a hand pump. So if it's still feeling uncomfortable, you can do a little bit more and maintain.
What are some of the challenges that moms face extended nursing?
Oh boy, yes. Okay, so this is why I have a job. It's because there are
Right.
challenges. It's not all magical. And I want to be clear too, because I hope it hasn't sounded so far that I'm like encouraging everyone to be an extended nursing mom. One, not all kids want to be like you can't force a kid, I'll put it that way. You can't force a kid to be an extended nursing kid. Um, and if a mom gets to a year, 18 months, wherever, and you're done and you're ready to, start the weaning process, that is not, I'm not here to make any judgment of when someone should stop nursing. It's more advocating for you to nurse as long as you want, as long as it's healthy for you. So let's talk about some of those reasons why moms come to me, usually completely angry or frustrated, saying, like, I have to wean. It's usually being burnt out and touched out, that it's swung so far that there's the transition to toddler nursing. The way I talk about it is there needs to be a balance. It's a relationship. And in the beginning stages of infant nursing, if it's a ballroom dance, right? The baby's in the lead and you have to watch their cues and know if they're crying, you waited too long to nurse. What's wrong with you, And when you get to toddlerhood, there has to be a transition where the parent starts to become a little bit more of the lead, and it can be uncomfortable. Um, Especially if, I mean, toddlers are not known for necessarily being chill, right? They get opinionated, and I find a lot of moms struggle with a strong-willed kid. So if your kid wants to nurse when and where and how, and if they don't get what they want, they're gonna let you know. That can be really hard. I also find that moms struggle because gentle parenting right now is the thing, right? Everyone wants to be gentle, but gentle doesn't necessarily, there's a balance between permissiveness and gentle parenting. And so I find when parents who lean more toward permissive parenting or just go with the flow easy, like I'll just give in, struggle with setting those boundaries because kids get upset when you set boundaries. And there's, you have to get used to a toddler being crying because they're upset versus crying an infant who's hungry, right? And what I teach is, well, it's not just setting the boundary, saying no and walking away. It's the gentle part comes in with is comforting them and letting them have their big feelings about being upset, but still not giving in. So that's the tricky part with toddler nursing, is whether you are just getting to a place. A lot of people just need that switch from on-demand toddler nursing to setting some limits, getting to a space where it's not 24/7 nursing, it's maybe 3 or 4 times a day nursing. And then they're kind of good. They can maybe go longer than they thought they might want to. Um, but it is also hard when you've nursed so long, especially I find it with a mom who knows they're not going to have any more children. It's like their last baby. There's a grieving process that's intense. And I know it's there. I think we all go through it with nursing, but the end of that relationship is it's a loss, and it can be scary as a mom to worry that you're not going to be that special person anymore. It's almost like, well, what's special about me now? And like I was the only one who had the superpower to fix them and be their everything. And now that thing goes away. And so there's kind of an identity crisis almost with that. Like, how do I parent? Who am I as a mom if I'm not a nursing mom? And I find that, that's why I try to build some community around that. It's like when you're doing that by yourself, it can be even harder to process and understand. And if you're trying to talk to people, even your partner who's watched you through this, and they just may not understand why you're feeling so heavy. Like some of them might say, like, are you excited to have your body back? Or now you can leave. But it's like, maybe you don't want to leave your child, it can be really, really hard.
I'm glad you mentioned that because when I was going through it at the beginning, when I knew it was kind of the begin, and like this was like a 2 month process. Like I
Yeah.
said, I feel like she's like kind of done now, but I felt 2 months ago she was done. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
really been a slow, gradual process, but I could feel it coming at the beginning of July. And before that, so she was like 19 months, right? So before that, I was like in my head so convinced that we were going to go until she was 2. I'm like, okay, we'll go till 2 unless she wants to stop before. I'll cross and I'll get help when that, like, I was ready to go till 2, right? I was convinced that like that was going to happen. And like when she started to slowly wean, and we could talk about weaning blues because
Mhm.
I really didn't realize it was a thing. I really thought I would be more relieved, but I was so sad.
Yeah.
I was so sad. I was like, I was crying. I was
Uh-huh.
moody. I mean, I was a mess. And then I was like, is this weaning blues? Like, is this what this is? So talk about weaning blues. And is it just, is that a myth or is that like a real thing?
No, it's absolutely a real thing. It's something I talk about in all my courses is um just letting you have to let yourself feel it. And a lot of it, if it helps to be a little more academic with it, is a lot of it's your hormones regulating too. As I mentioned, all of breastfeeding is hormone related. And so you are no longer getting those hits of oxytocin, and so that's going to bring you down a little bit. And your estrogen is starting to rise again. And so your body is going back to it's not fully like a pre-baby state, but it's going to be regulating out a bit. And that anytime your hormones change, it's going to kind of wreak havoc on you, how you feel. And so that's one element. And the other is it's just sad. It's the end of this, like for me, it was 4 years. It was my daughter just turned 8. And I had this realization that I was like, wait, so it's been 4 years and I still have nursed her half her life. Like that's crazy. And it's scary to feel like maybe that relationship's going to change and you don't want it to. And there's a lot of going back and forth. A part of the process I hear every time I talk to mom is like that. I want to be done, but I don't want to be done. And there's a holding on to it. It's like, there's always a point when I get to discussions about weaning where there's like boundary setting and this and that. But when it gets to like, let's talk about your last nursing session, and there is a heaviness with that. And there are tears. And that's usually when I know when someone's actually ready to wean. I talk about weaning in different stages, really about four to five stages. And the last being actually weaned, like you were in stage 5. But there is a process, almost like anger, sadness, all of these things, these emotions, that grief you feel. But when people come to me and they're upset, I know they're not ready to wean yet. They have other issues, like not issues, meaning like they need to set the boundaries. They need to um, get out of the crazy on demand cycle. But if someone comes to me and I can see them physically like holding their breath because they don't want to cry because we've just met and they don't want to cry with me yet, and I say like, it's okay if you need to cry, that's when I know, like, okay, we're ready to, how do we move through this? And part of what I bring to the table too is let's celebrate it, because it can be such a heavy thing. And so focusing on what are you going to do at the end? What are you doing after? Having some sort of ceremony or celebration or ending, because it can feel so abrupt if you just have this nursing session, you're kind of just like, all right. And like, that's how mine was. And I wish there are so many things I would go back, having known what I know now, I would have maybe done different. I didn't even take a picture. I didn't even think about it. I didn't know that was a thing I should do or could do, right? Like, because I was fairly modest, so I don't have a lot of pictures of it. I was not on social media and nursing. Like, I love that people do that. That was not my thing. Like, I didn't share a lot of that. And so those are things that you can kind of look forward to, and that can kind of get you over that grief by knowing there's something on the other side that you can hold on to too.
Don't mind me just getting emotional while you're
No,
talking about all this
I know.
stuff. I'm just like, oh, it's bringing it back. But
I
but
know.
I know that some moms can't relate because there's some
Yeah.
moms that are just like, I did everything I could to make it through 6 months and then I was done. Like, so it's just like to talk to someone who like gets it and like really like the grief process and all that. It's really nice to like have someone that you can talk to that's like been there. What are some reasons why moms want to be done nursing?
I mean, one of the biggest ones is body back and actually bringing it into your like fitness and talking about that a little bit.
Sure.
Like having your body to yourself again. But that being said, I also see this cycle of guilt, mom guilt, of feeling that's not a valid reason to want to wean. It's like, I want to wean for myself, but that's not a good enough reason. So I need to keep going because wanting to wean for myself isn't okay. And it totally is okay. It is a valid reason. Like if you are just done and to me, as I've been saying, like this should be an amazing connection and bonding moment with your child while you have it. But for so many who are struggling quietly because no one understands, it is like every time your toddler wants to share your body and you don't want to, it can feel so heavy and like physiologically like cringing because you don't want to do this thing, but if you say no, they're going to freak out and you're going to give in anyway. So you might as well just do it. And so that's one of the biggest ones. And so just validating if you want, for me, I couldn't lose weight. I lost 20 pounds in like 3 months after I stopped nursing. One was I simply had just had some time. I had time to dedicate to myself that was actually going to pumping and nursing before. And there is an ability to disconnect from your child and be away longer that now on this side of it is amazing, right? It's amazing to just be like, bye, I'm gonna go for a while and not feel that stress to come back, that invisible string between the two of you that was always there. Um, Another, so yeah, I think working out and my kids were both very clingy. So when I see videos of people are like, "Oh, I just have the baby right there and then I'm working out." I'm like, that didn't work for me. Like she just would scream if I put her down. So it wasn't possible. Um, let's see. What was your question? Wanting to wean, right? Other reasons to want to wean. Another big one that I get people contact me for is wanting another kid. So that's a whole part of thing to discuss that people maybe aren't sure if they want to continue nursing while trying to conceive, if it's safe to do that. Is it safe to nurse while pregnant? Which for the vast majority, it is. The asterisk I would say to that is if you have miscarried, then you will want to be careful because nursing can produce small contractions, and so you just want to be very careful. But otherwise, it is perfectly safe to do. But that said, some women don't, I understandably wouldn't want to be pregnant and nursing at the same time because that's a lot on your body. Um, so that's another reason. That being said, again, bringing the guilt back into it, that can be very heavy. That when you start to have another child, whether it's you're pregnant or when the baby comes, it can be really hard I think for anyone when that second kid comes to see the disconnect it brings with your older child, because practically speaking, you have less time to give to them. But for me, nursing allowed us to stay connected, but that's not going to work for everyone. So it makes sense that that would be a reason why someone would want to wean. Sorry, I'm trying to not do it right into the microphone.
That's okay. I can probably edit that part out.
Okay.
um, hold on, let me write where we're at. 40 minutes. Um, I'm glad that you mentioned the a mom just simply wanting her body back and that not feeling selfish because That's totally me. Like the only reason why I really wanted to be done after a year was because selfishly, like I could not lose the baby weight. Like
Mhm.
I kept 15, I mean, it's slowly coming off now, but like I kept 15 pounds on me. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, no matter what I do, I can't lose this weight. And I'm like, is it the nursing? And I've seen on social media that there's a lot of women who actually keep weight on while nursing. I know some
Yeah.
women like lose it like it's, oh, nursing is going to help you lose weight, but for me like that was
It
not the
didn't.
case at all. And
Mhm.
is that a lot of women? Like do a lot of women hold on to weight while they're nursing to, and like what is that? Just our body kind of safeguarding our supply, keeping extra fat reserves?
For some, yeah, I think there's various reasons. One is that yes, for some women, their metabolism might speed up and it might help them in the beginning lose weight quicker. But for others, myself included, that was just not the case. The other component is when you are, especially in the infant stage, you do need to take in more calories. You're burning a lot, but you're also, need to increase your food intake. And sometimes when you get to toddler nursing, that food intake, like you've reduced the amount of nursing sessions, but maybe your food intake has stayed the same. And so there's just a relative, food in energy and energy out situation. Um, and it can be hard though if to reduce your food intake and be hungry, and then you're keeping that supply up. And so I think for a lot of women, it's just like, all right, I'm just gonna eat when I'm hungry. I'm gonna feed the kid, and they just kind of keep doing that until they're done.
Yeah. How long does the weaning process actually take? I mean, I'm sure it's different for everybody, but when a mom comes to you and says, I want to wean, what does that typically look like?
That's a great question. So I always advocate gentle weaning, and what that I gentle for you, gentle for them. And on average, I would say like your situation sounds pretty common, that it's usually I suggest to people give it about 3 months um to fully wean in a way that is loving, that is supportive, and that teaches you what the other thing about it is, like, if you're taking something away from both you as a parent and your child, that you need to replace it with something. That's what's missing in the whole process, is it can't just be, well, I'm just gonna stop, right? Which is what everyone says. Well, just stop. It's like, oh, really? Is that easy? Okay. Um, so I usually look at the runway being about 3 months. But so when people come to me and they say, like, oh, I have a trip in 2 weeks, I'm still nursing at night and 5 times during the day. I mean, it's possible, but that's not going to be in a way that you can't do it in the way I suggest in that time frame. Um, what I see a lot actually is moms will come to me, say they want to wean, they start setting those boundaries, and actually they go much longer until they get to those final stages. So it there's no like hard and fast rule, but I would say 3 months. Like if you're like get in the mindset of, okay, I want to be done, but you're still nursing several times a day, give it 3 months.
I think that's a really good approach. Now, what can moms, I know you said like not just abruptly stopping, like what do moms replace nursing with?
That's a great question. So the thing I talk most about, and this comes from my experience, my lived experience in learning, like when I lost actually, when my milk dried up the first time, I guess I didn't share this part. The first time with my daughter when I was pregnant, I kind of didn't know what to do with her because she was 2.5 and she was pretty pissed that like she couldn't always have her milk anymore. Like sometimes she would be fine, but if she was upset, especially or scared, she was getting nightmares. It was really hard not having that tool. So something I found was utilizing play basically, or in special connective time, very specific types of play where it's not just hours of them meandering, but like very much like letting them be in control a bit and saying like, okay, for this time frame, 10 minutes, you're in control. You have my full attention. Um, that I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm not going to, do anything else. It's for you. Because really that's what they need. They need us. And what we've taught them a lot of the time is the the only way to get our full attention is to nurse. That's when it's just the two of us. That's when we're looking eye to eye. And so what I see too often is, well, we're cutting the nursing sessions, but we're not replacing it with any other substantial connection. And if you're constantly just keeping the disconnect, yeah, they're probably going to get more upset and you're going to have to handle those tantrums in other ways. But if you can, even in the morning, and it feels so hard to do, but I find that it's most effective in terms of increased cooperation is when they have the most struggle, that like whether it's getting out of bed or getting out of the house in the morning, if it's at night, if you can insert a little bit of one-on-one time instead of the nursing session before you wean as part of the weaning process, it makes it easier overall because they're going to have more confidence that you will be there even if the milk isn't. And you can build confidence that you can parent without the boob.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned this. How do you know that your milk has dried up? Like, and
Mm.
how do you, if you're done, how long can that process take? Because, like, it's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, I know she's done, but there's probably still milk. How long does that process take?
It's very dependent, and like I said, like, for me, I know others that it could take years, but we've also the other person I'm thinking of was also a nurser of a 4-year-old, um, but others, I would say months. It could take a couple months, but it shouldn't. Again, like, if you've done it in a gradual way, you shouldn't hopefully have that engorged feeling. And I would what I actually part of weaning that I you want to if you are feeling engorged, self-express a little bit, but most likely just try to let it go because if you are stimulating, you're going to keep producing. So if you can tolerate it or you're not feeling it, just let it be and your body will regulate it out. There's nothing else you need to do to dry it up at that point.
Okay. And so to wrap this up, what advice can you give for a mom who's an extended nurser of a toddler and she wants to wean?
I would say give yourself grace and patience, and, um, it's okay if there's a learning curve for both of you. It's okay if they are upset when you say no to milk. It can feel hard to figure out how to handle them. I actually taking it this is where other people's advice can come in handy because everyone else around your child parents with or helps care for them without the boob, right? So if you have a partner, say like, how do you deal with a tantrum, you know, when I'm not home, and see if you can pick up pointers on how to navigate it. Um, and just reach out for help. I'm here and can help you. I also because I mean obviously we've been focusing on this, but if you are listening and you didn't make it to a year or you're struggling, you reach out too. I don't just do extended nursing, but even though that is my focus, but if your goal is to get there and you're struggling, we can figure out ways to maybe help get you to that goal. Because it almost feels like no matter what, no matter how long you nurse, we always kind of feel like we failed in some way. I don't know how or why that is, but it's like there are so many milestones. But even for you, I'm wondering because you kind of had in your mind 2 years. How did that mess with your mind at all when you were like you were thinking 2 years and then all of a sudden she didn't quite get to 2 years? Did your
Well,
ability to kind of
it's funny because I totally did not think it would be her to stop. I didn't think it would be her to stop it. Like we had such a beautiful, oh, I'm gonna
Mm.
cry. We had such a beautiful journey. That when she was showing signs of weaning, I was like, I was happy, I was sad. I was like, wow, like she's gonna do this. Like, this is gonna
Yeah.
be her lead. And honestly, like, I just followed her lead. And like I said, it was such a slow gentle like weaning that I can't really tell you what our last day was because I didn't want to put that pressure on us. I just kind of wanted it to like fizzle out naturally. So I took some pictures, I took some videos like during the month of like her weaning. And of course, like I'm emotional talking about it right now, but I'm glad that it happened like that because like oh, I mean, I would be seeking you for help though. Like if I
Yeah.
was someone who was like really struggling weaning, setting boundaries, like ending that relationship, I would really want that support because I'm like how do I do this? But I just followed her lead and it
Yeah.
was really beautiful and gradual and like I said, I don't know when the last day was. I couldn't tell you, and I'm kind of glad because I'd probably be
Mm.
more emotional on that day knowing that it was the last time. So I just kind of like mentally have been preparing myself for the last 2 months that this was going to be ending. And
Yeah.
that's just where we're at right now. But I'm grateful that you exist for other moms that need the help and need the support that need a process to follow. I had a mom reach out to me that was literally like, how did you do it? Like, how did you
Mm-hmm.
wean her? And I'm just like, I can't really help you because I've just kind of followed her lead, but I know somebody who can. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, that's why that I wanted to do this episode because not I know not all babies are going to be like Evelyn and just be like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm done, and like slowly, gently wean themselves, right? So, where can moms find you, Erin, if they want to seek your help and your support and your resources?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. That you more than welcome to DM me on there. That's at Erin.nursingmamas. And I have a podcast as well. So if you enjoy podcasts, it's called Weaning It. And I have 2 episodes a month. One is usually educational solo show, and one is with a guest with extended nurser with a unique story to share. And my goal with that is just to show you that you're not alone, that there's no one right way to do it. Like your story is so beautiful, and you know it's what so many moms want is just to let it be in their court and wean on their terms. But can I ask you, did it feel did you ever feel like it was a bit of a rejection?
Not no, not really. I
Okay.
mean, no, not really. Yeah, no, I was just trusting her. I was like, I think
That's great.
because she's 20 months and I'm just like, no, this is like what she wants. And, like if she was like 6 months old or 9 months old, I might feel differently. Like I have some
Mm.
clients of mine who theirs were done at 12, 13 months and they were like, no, I was going to nurse you until you were 3, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Like what I just think like what they want and what we want may not always match up, right?
Yes.
And
That's
so
absolutely true. I would say most of
yeah,
the time it doesn't. And
right.
so whatever the emotions you're feeling around the nursing experience is valid. And I think a lot of moms are hope to be in your position, right? Like they come to me, they're like, I've been doing, don't provide, what is it? Now
Like don't
I'm
offer, don't reject
thank
or
you.
whatever.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
offer, don't
Yeah.
refuse. I've been doing don't offer, don't refuse for 3 years. And it's not work. Like they just keep
Right.
waiting for it to happen. And for some kids it happens, and some kids that's just like their blanket. It's
Right.
like telling them
Right.
to throw their special blankie in the trash. And so you have to be gentle with that, like not just the gentle parenting way, but just respectful and understanding, while also just recognizing that isn't always going to fly. Like you do sometimes have to help land the plane.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why people like you exist and your resources and your education exists. So I really appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you. I forgot about my quiz. My quiz is a really great way to just kind of get some base starter information. It's the extended nursing quiz, and whether you're at 1 year, like you're just hitting a year, or you're up and coming and curious about what comes after a year, all the way to if you think you're ready to be done. The quiz will let you know which stage of extended nursing you're in, and then provide you with information about how to best go based on where you are in the journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much,
And
Erin, for being here today.
thank you. And yeah, just reach out any questions anyone has, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. See you next time.